Starve the Children legislation coming up in the state legislature this week in the state senate for final approval on the Senate floor. So Chairman Herron's got a few remarks. He'll take questions afterwards, and if you need written copies of his remarks, I have them printed off as well for you to consider. So without further ado, Chairman Herron.
Thank you. Perhaps the worst bill yet from all the radical reactionary Republicans is Senate Bill 132 to slash income for needy families when a child struggles in school. This legislation is the brainchild and the only child of a bachelor. The bachelor has ideas about how we ought to raise our children based upon his own experiences of never having had children. I'm reminded of my wife's refrigerator magnet in our kitchen that goes something like this. I once had 3 theories about raising children. Now I have 3 children and no theories. That's kind of where this is. There's a charitable organization called Feed the Children. This bill should be called Starve the Children. In Matthew 25, Jesus taught that we're to feed the hungry, reminding us that whatsoever you do to the least of these, you did for me. Taking food from a child and her family because of struggles in school is one of the worst things a government could do to the least among us. A mother with 2 children gets $185 a month in TANF. This legislation would take 30%, $55 back away from that family. To put it in perspective, ladies and gentlemen, the Tennessee legislator each day there in Nashville gets more than 3 times this amount of money. I think it's about $173 a day. This would take back $55. To put it in perspective, for a woman with 2 children, get $185 of TANF support in the course of a month. That's about the same as a Tennessee legislator gets in 1 day's per diem. This would take back about 31% of that amount. And if you want to put it on a monthly perspective, in other words, the whole $185, ladies and gentlemen, that this family would get for 3 over the course of a month, it's about a 13th of what a legislator gets in per diem in the course of a month. Considerably less than 10% of what legislators get in per diem alone. How much does it mean to a struggling family? From the Kroger within sight of this Capitol building, those groceries were purchased for $52 and some change today. I'd be glad to share the receipt with you. That's what it would mean to a struggling mother with 2 children. Those would be groceries she and they would not have under this legislation. $52.12, including taxes, bought 2 cans of pasta sauce, 3 boxes of spaghetti noodles, 10 cans of chicken noodle soup, 4 cans of spaghetti and meatballs, 2 packages of 6 items of beef-flavored top ramen, 1 pound of carrots, 2 boxes of whole wheat crackers, 3 pounds of apples, 3 pounds of oranges, 10 pounds of potatoes, 1 gallon of 2% milk, 1 bag of wheat puff cereal, 2 loaves of bread, 1 jar of peanut butter, 1 canister of oatmeal, 10-pound bag of rice. We've got all that printed out for you if you're interested. So this is the Starve the Children legislation. But it also might be called Abuse the Children or Beat the Children. A couple of Sundays ago, on the front page of the Tennessean, you may have read the story from West Tennessee, where a parent physically and sexually abused his daughter, was taken into DCS custody, and then he shot and killed the husband who was trying to help her care for this child, shot and wounded the woman in that family, and shot and killed the child. I know a little about that case because my wife heard that case. And I know, I've read the 62-page opinion. I know what she found. I know what the proof was. And what the proof was, ladies and gentlemen, was that a seriously sick individual became greatly upset when the child was taken away and wound up killing 2 people and desperately wounding a third. Do you have any doubts but there will be some child who will catch unmitigated hell because some struggling parent or some demented parent takes it out on the child when their food is not there and when the benefits are not paid? A mother of 5 in my hometown lost her job because she took her child to the doctor and had to stay with him lest he lose his infected arm. She took him because I was running cross country with him one morning, looked at his arm and said, "You've got to see the nurse." The nurse said, "You've got to go to the doctor right now." Mother took him to the doctor, and when her shift started at the factory, she still hadn't seen the doctor with her child. Child in danger of losing the arm, potentially, if untreated, losing his life. She lost her job over that. When the young man told me that, I happened to know the employer. I called him. He told me they had a matter of policy. That was her second day work missed. She'd had the flu and she'd missed one day. She missed the second day. He was a friend of mine. But he said, "We have a policy. You're allowed one day missed for any reason in the course of a year. The second day, you're gone." When you live in counties with double-digit unemployment, you can have pretty strict attendance policies, and they did, and they do. This bill would say to a mother who's working and trying and struggling that she has to risk her job to go to that 8 hours. Nothing for us, nothing for legislators making $173 a day in per diem on top of everything else, but for some of these struggling families, an enormous burden. All Democrats, and so far just a few, specifically 2 reasonable and responsible Republicans, have opposed this legislation. But the reactionary and radical Republicans are moving forward with this weapon in the Republican war on children. You know, after 1949, the Geneva Convention provided that humanitarian protections would be there for children in a war zone. 194 countries signed an international agreement. Article 50 says that even in times of war, an occupying country cannot interfere with or reduce measures a country has in place to provide food and medical care to children, expecting mothers and mothers of young children. I suppose since some of these radical Republicans don't believe in international agreements, they would question the wisdom of those 194 countries, including our own. Our country that agreed to protect children, provide them with adequate food and medical care. The radical Republicans in their war already have or are attempting to keep 80,000 children in working families from getting health care, 80,000 of 300,000 that could have been covered by Medicaid expansion, children. They've made the cuts and tolerated the mismanagement of the Department of Children's Services, with children literally dying. They've moved to defund children's public schools through corporate giveaways to K-12 Inc.'s virtual school, giving tax dollars to Michael Milliken and Company. They voted to defund public schools by giving vouchers for segregation academies and sectarian schools. They voted to defund public education by overriding local school boards on expanding charters through out-of-state for-profit companies. They've attacked public school teachers, harmed their working environment, which is our children's learning environment. They've cut lottery scholarships or attempted to do so. They've increased public college tuition. They've denied kids' families a living wage. If you want to see the starkest contrast between Tennessee Democrats and the radical Republicans, this bill is it. We should be protecting and providing for our children, not starving them if they struggle in school. The radical Republican war on children should be stopped. This bill should be defeated. And I call today on all responsible and reasonable Republicans, like the 2 that voted no on this bill in full committee, to join with Tennessee's Democrats to stop this bill, to starve the children. I'll be glad to respond to questions.
Can you explain exactly what this is again?
Yeah, and I can give you a list of it if that helps.
But, I mean,
this was purchased for $52.12, including tax, from the Kroger's within inside of the Capitol building.
And I mean, what does that figure represent again?
$55 is how much a mother with 2 children would lose under this legislation. She gets $185 TANF benefits. This would slash their benefits by 30%. That's about $55. That's about what this means to that
The
family.
legislation's been amended in the House so that the figures are slightly different? I'm just wondering if it's...
I don't think the 30% has changed, at least not the amendment I saw. I'll stand corrected if anybody knows different. They've got some different provisions. They've tweaked it some, but I think the 30% is still in there. At least it was when I read it that way when I read the amendment.
Your language is pretty harsh towards them. I've just never seen you so quite hopping mad ever before. Is this what's your gut reaction on this? I mean, from the very words that you've been using.
My language is harsh because their action is harsh. To abuse children, to take away from their very food and sustenance because they struggle in school, it's not good public policy, and it's sure not Christian ethics.
Well, this is about attendance, though, as much as anything, right? I mean, not just about struggling, but it has to do with kids not going to school pretty regularly. Isn't that, I mean, that's part of what we're talking about.
There can be different ways that it triggers. Not passing a grade is one of those triggers. Not attending. I had a young man on the cross-country team whose mother, a couple of years ago, they moved, well, Rick, not that far from your stomping ground, Sheville, a little ways from Fayetteville, but they moved at the end of the school year. She up and moved that child. Now, the situation in that, whether it involved domestic abuse or what the situation was, I don't know. But I know that child had no say-so in whether he got to finish that school year. And under this legislation, the benefits to help support that child would be slashed. There are cases, I mean, it's one thing for those of us who have happy marriages. It's one thing for those of us who have intact homes. But what if you're that single parent who married beneath herself and the scoundrel's not around, he's run off, maybe running her off with somebody else? Or maybe he's physically violent. It happens day after day. This is not just theoretical, ladies and gentlemen. This happens every single day in Tennessee. Some woman is abused, some child is abused, and literally somebody's food is going to be at risk because of this legislation. Andy?
Well, Senator, I mean, is it not true that most of these people who receive TANF also are on food stamps? You know, get food stamp benefits and such? I mean, is this
If they get additional benefits, it doesn't mean there's going to be enough to cover what a mother and two children have. If the money's not used for food, I mean, imagine trying to get by on $185 cash for a month. You're talking about $6 a day for 3 people trying to survive. The food stamps, I'm told, stand to be corrected if you know otherwise, but whatever food stamp somebody might get does not pay for all the groceries that a family needs to get by.
There was some talk, I mean, when the education reforms a couple of years ago were going through, adding in more accountability to teacher performances, Democrats really talked a lot about how their parents were the ones who actually bore as much responsibility, if not more so, than the performance of children in schools. I mean, what kind of accountability? I mean, this would appear to be an effort to add some accountability to parents. I guess. Do you have any alternative suggestions?
I don't question the intentions of somebody who doesn't have children and doesn't go on a daily basis to the public schools with their children. Somebody who doesn't understand the situation. The situation involved, like the case where there's domestic violence situation, where there's problems. There's a reason why no other state has done this. There's a reason when the sponsor, why the sponsor has to cite another country. And even if you look up the legislation or the policy in Brazil, it's not this policy. It's not this harsh. It doesn't take away. It gives incentives and gives additional benefits. There's a reason why no other state has been so radical or reactionary to do this, and why Tennessee ought not fall to the very bottom of the country in compassion.
Do you think this gives us, as a state, a black eye? Do you think just even the mentioning of this brings...
Well, one of the things that, quite frankly, that I wrestle with is do you run the risk by calling attention to it that somebody elsewhere reads more about Tennessee and is put off when you're trying to attract industrial prospects. I think the worst fate would be, quite frankly, if we pass this doggone thing, and it becomes the law in Tennessee, and I think there'll be plenty of publicity over that, too much publicity over that. So I hope what's going to happen is that there are responsible and reasonable Republicans. 2 of them voted no on this bill in committee. I hope others will join with them, and this bill will not pass. I hope they'll join every one of the Democrats, and all the Democrats so far have voted no on this bill. I hope the reasonable and responsible Republicans will join with them, and this legislation will stop. I think that's in the best interest of Tennessee. I recognize the danger you point out, and it's a fair question. I think the worst publicity would come if we actually enacted this. And beyond that, the worst impact would be on these children.
Anything else, folks?
Thank you all for taking the time to come.
Absolutely. Appreciate you all coming. If you like to talk to, I have written remarks. As